We have Robert, Don, and John here.
Yep, and myself. So I think do we need to do roll call? I think we just did it, right?
Yes, and Kurt.
Okay. And Kurt. There we go. Okay, so we'll skip ahead to item 3, which is public participation. And here we go. Public participation enables the public to address the commission about an item that is not on the agenda. If you wish to address the commission, please state your name, number, and address for the record. The Arizona Open Meeting Law prohibits the commission from discussing or taking action on an item which is not listed on the prepared agenda. The commission members may, however, respond to criticism made by those addressing the commission, ask staff to review a matter, or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. Public comment should be limited to 3 minutes reading time. So do we have anybody that would like to have a moment of public participation? Either in person or online. Going once, twice. Okay, we'll move to item 4, approval minutes. Does anybody have any comments or revisions to the minutes as published?
No changes from me.
Okay.
Thumbs up from John.
Yep. Don is looking. I don't have any happy. Yes, Marion. Wow. Okay. I don't think we have any revisions. Fantastic. Thank you again, Marion. Your minutes are always fantastic. So can I have a motion to approve the minutes as published?
This is John Nauman. I will approve motion to approve the minutes.
Okay, get a second.
Don Bills, second motion, approve the minutes as written.
Thank you, Don. And all those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? No opposed. All right, we pass unanimously. Excellent. Thank you. Let's go on to item 5A, which is new business, and Ed Shank is going to give us an update on flood updates. Ed, thank you.
Yeah, good afternoon, commissioners. Yeah, good to see you as well. So we'll give you a quick update on, or a quick flood update. It's been a while since we've been up here. I believe it was May, and you'll see I have a November 2nd or 12th thing on here because this is the exact same presentation we just gave to City Council. So we'll just kind of reiterate this just without the long stream of presenters. So the purpose here is just to go over the flood seasons, the monsoon season, and then some of the capital projects that we're putting in place for mostly the post-fire flooding. So quick overview there. I think I've walked through most of that already. Overall map, you can see those fires that we've been talking about for years now. Watershed conditions. So this, I wish Commissioner Lovrich was here because he could give his slides. But these are his slides from looking at some of the watershed conditions on the museum fire through the years. And I'm going to walk through it pretty quickly, but basically the takeaways, we've seen some recovery in some of the low and moderate burn severity areas. Some of the high burn severity, it's recovered to some degree as well. Mostly it's a vegetation state change for the moderate and high. So you're changing from a ponderosa pine forest to more grassland and shrubs, and that's been staying pretty consistent for these last few years. So yeah, again, this is bullet points. So aspen and oak growth is improving. Spatial extent is pretty limited, mostly on those north-facing slopes. We've got quite a bit of the early successional forbs and grasses coming through. So that is helping the watershed. We're going to see a little bit less flooding than we did immediately after 2019. The significant blowdown of the dead trees is also helping. Looking forward, we're going to see how that recovery continues. And we're learning some lessons from some other fires in the area. We commissioned, Stormwater commissioned a study looking at the museum predictions for the next 10 years. And we had some really cool results from the 1977 radio fire, which is on Mount Eldon, to compare it. Cool in a scientific way, I should say. Maybe not so cool from a flooding perspective. So we do still see some heightened flood risk even in that 1977 fire, which is probably why Fanning Wash floods every 3 or 4 years. So just kind of the takeaway there is that we still have that flood risk in Spruce Wash. It's still quite a bit elevated from pre-fire. And then Joe's slides going into the 2024 monsoons. Little busy here, but those purple bars on the far right of each station, so these are different rain gauges throughout the area. You can see that we had, I don't know, about average rainfall this year on that burn scar, but nothing that was too severe. And with that, we didn't really see much in terms of runoff. One of the events early in the year is in June. It was over 2 inches on one of the gauges. It really got a lot of people worked up. But if you look on the radar on the right-hand side, you can see that storm barely hit that gauge in the burn scar. That one that's circled in 2.48 inches. That's Museum West, which is just right on the edge of Dry Lake Hills. So really, most of that rain was over on the Schultz Creek side and the unburned part of Schultz Creek. And that's why we didn't see much flow out of that one event. Again, going through it, we saw some rain events, but nothing that was too spectacular and nothing that really had large runoff. And again, one thing we're probably going to want to keep looking at is that watershed recovery. These are 2 flows, so 2022 peak flow and then the peak flow in 2024, same locations. You can kind of see the ones on the left from 2022, qualitatively a little bit higher than what we're seeing in 2024. But again, we just don't have the data to say exactly how much of that watershed is recovered and to what degree. So moving into some of those capital projects, this is that suite of projects for Spruce Wash, 10 projects. The ones that have a little asterisk are ones that are completed, and the ones that are still numbered are ones that are ongoing today. So obviously quite a bit of work, and we're moving very quickly on that. So our original plan back in November of 2022, so just 2 years ago, when Proposition 441 passed, was to have this completed by the end of 2026. And we're moving pretty quickly on this. It's looking like the majority of this work is going to be completed next year in 2025. And 2026 will really just be final cleanup and closeout. So we are moving quickly. Eagle Mountain Construction, who's the CMAR, the construction manager at risk, is working great with the team. We do have weekly meetings between, excuse me, our technical advisory committee and the CMAR. Total estimated project cost right now is kind of bouncing around 39-40 million. So 26 million of that's from that Proposition 441 bond, and then we've been piecing together the rest and been really pretty successful with that. So a large component coming from our road repair and street safety, and then quite a bit coming from grants. Apologies. So we'll go through. Go ahead.
To take questions now or
Sure.
wait till the end? I'm wondering if you could give us a little further description of the wedge project and the anticipated timeline for the closure of Linda Vista. I know that's a fair disruption to some of the residents in the area because the alternate is through, by the Puente de Hozo and MEMS, and that's a nightmare in the mornings and afternoons. And so there are a lot of folks interested in
Definitely.
when that will come to an end.
Yeah, so I'll walk, when we get to that project, I'll kind of walk through the timing on those. Yeah. Yep, no problem. So starting at the first one here, that's Grandview Drive reconstruction. Here's an old photo of it. The project was to invert that crown, and I think they actually had some drone video in this. So invert that crown so that the water is going in the middle of the street and then down towards Cedar and Main. So this is completed. You can see the street, the new curb and gutter. You can't see, but it costs a a lot of money, the new utilities underground. So this has worked really great. And even this summer in those smaller rain events, we saw it work really great. So there's a lot of water in that central valley gutter that pushed it down to the terminal drain that pushed it back into the wash. So great project, great drone video. I believe that was done by our folks over in IT. But yep, so that one is complete. All right, moving on. The wedge. So yeah, number 2. All right, so the wedge is an offline detention basin. So it is over in that area. We call it the wedge, the little wedge of city land over near Cedar Safeway. So that is to take the overflow that will not fit in the channel and put it into the detention basin and meter that back into the channel along Cedar. To get there, that what you're seeing in these photos is a 60-inch concrete pipe. These are being installed right now, and that's the reason why Linda Vista is closed and will be closed until spring. So Linda Vista will be closed until spring as we complete the 60-inch pipe, as well as the Linda Vista culvert, which is also ongoing. So we're doing both of those concurrently. A lot of work. They're moving fast. So if the weather holds up and we don't have a huge snowstorm, personally, I'd like a lot of snow. It'd be great to go skiing. But if we don't have a big snowstorm, we'll probably be done with this early. But trying to be realistic and pessimistic, we're thinking springtime still for that closure. But yes, we are very much aware of the disruption. I drive through it every day as well. So right there with you. Linda Vista Crossing, this is kind of an older photo. They're pouring concrete now. But that's that crossing, another reason why the road's closed. Moving quickly with it. This would be both the crossing to continue down the channel as it should, as well as the diversion into that 60-inch pipe when you reach a certain threshold. Here's some of the footings for it, and we're much further along as of today. Linda Vista Cedar channel. So we're doing the rough gradings going in right now. It was slowed up with some of the gas main. That's why there's a picture of a new gas main. But some of the gas main issues as well as the service lines to the residents. But that's moving pretty quickly and will be a new shotcrete channel. Next, we see Cedar Avenue Crossing. This will actually be partially funded by a FEMA grant, one of the few FEMA grants that went seamlessly and quickly. I wish they all did. So here's our current condition, our concrete culvert, and the new culvert will be slightly larger and arched. So that will take more capacity, up to 700 CFS. And then what you can't see here is there will also be a lateral line coming in from whatever comes down Grandview will be shunted back, and also the wedge will be shunted back to the channel underneath the road there. So you'll have some lateral storm drain coming back in. Arroyo Seco to Dorotha channel. This has gone through multiple design iterations. I think we're almost there. And that's going to also include some property acquisition that we are working very hard to get that congressional directed spending through FEMA. It's been 2 years of wrangling, but we're very close. And with that, we'll be able to buy a couple parcels that will help with this channel configuration as well as help enlarging the Ponderosa Park. So it'll be a new portion of the park, as well as the inlet back to Arroyo Seco. This would be the inlet back into that 60-inch existing pipe. What does not go in the 60-inch pipe will overflow through the park through a new natural swale, so natural just kind of low-lying area, and what we call the Killip Basin's inlet. And it'll go through that swale and then drop it down like cascade into the existing Killip basins. So there's 2 basins that exist right now that we built a couple of years back at Killip School. And then a future, this has kind of been stuck in limbo for a while. We're going to get it built one way or the other. This is another FEMA grant for the secondary Killip Basin outlet. So this is an outlet that would assist with the existing outlet. Existing one goes back to Spruce. Obviously, that's going to be compromised when Spruce is flowing full. So this secondary outlet on the north or southwest side will flow into the west wash drain, which is a 48-inch drain that goes down. I can't remember which street, but they'll connect to that, and then I'll bring it down and connect back at Route 66 where it's open channel. So it gives us a second way to have a pressure relief valve, if you will. And that's, yeah, kind of more of that. That's the alignment. So that manhole cover is that 48-inch pipe, or down below it there is. And that hash line would be that new pipe from Killip School that would drop into what we call West Wash, or the West Wash pipe. Traffic control, a lot of interest again on Linda Vista. So it is closed traffic through spring. Hopefully we can do that a little sooner, but no guarantees. And then right now we're maintaining that pedestrian and bike access that will be maintained through the entire project on Linda Vista. And when we are done in spring, we should be able to do quick lane shifts in some of the other areas so we don't have to have another closure of this magnitude. So this really is the biggest closure, road closure, that we're going to have in this whole suite of projects. Lots of communication going out with Beta PR, our contracted communications group, as well as Sarah Langley's group here at the city. So a lot of good stuff going out in terms of meet in the streets, news releases, door hangers, weekly newsletters, meetings with Sunnyside Neighborhood Association, etc. All right, so moving from museum fire over to pipeline fire. So moving from the east side of town to the west. Schultz Creek is complete, which is really pretty impressive for 2 years after a fire. Excuse me. So it's a whole suite of projects, kind of hard to see on this map. Some county funded ones up on the forest in terms of sediment stabilization structures, our Schultz basins at the Schultz Y, Francis Short Pond being dredged, Savannah Way having a new swale installed, and then most recently, and probably the biggest, Highway 180 project. Apologies. So Highway 180, it is done. Has about $7 million, fully funded through State Bill 1720. We have a quick little drone video here that kind of shows you the inlet, the outlet, and the configuration of it. So really great project. Bennigan Construction was our partner. Great folks to work with. And yeah, we have a huge amount of capacity now. We have almost 1,000 CFS that we can take through this new pipe. The old pipe, the capacity was about 40. So it went from 40 CFS to about 1,000. So pretty substantial improvement. You can see the open channel. It's a new open channel that drains down to the Rio. So very cool project. Great people to work with. Grand Canyon Trust, we worked with them. The fire station, American Conservation Experience, the Lutheran Church, Museum of Northern Arizona. So quite a few partners there, and some great work. And again, this will provide benefits. These maps are impossible to read for being this small, but this provides benefits not just for the post-fire environment, but also for the FEMA floodplain. So when we have this remapped, we'll be able to remap some areas out of the FEMA floodplain, which will be a great success. So we'll be working on that in the next few years. Hoping to get a grant, but if we don't, we'll find some stormwater funds to pay for that study. So with that, the short-term mitigations over in Coconino Estates have been removed, which is also really great to see. So the sandbags, the barrier, everything in Coconino Estates, Savannah Way area has been removed. Some of it in volunteer events and some both contracted and staff events to get that out of there. And that sand's been repurposed, or that cinder has been repurposed. We had Joe Dirt excavating, bringing their trommel screen, which is like a giant drum, and they're able to separate out the cinders from the bags. So we're reusing the cinders, and the bags are taken to the landfill. Brief mention, we did have some non-fire related flooding this year, all very, I don't want to say minor, but localized. So a little bit on Mead Lane and Coconino Estates, some on Lockett Drive, Country Club area, and then Fox Glen area. Just saw some microbursts that had some localized flooding, mostly sidewalks, yards. I think there's a few garages that saw some water. Just a reminder, even though we spent a lot of time talking about wildfires and floods, there's a lot of flooding issues in the city, obviously related to just urban infrastructure and old code. Legislative actions or lobbying, I should say. We've had a whole lot of meetings between staff, policymakers, others, lobbyists, with both state, federal, nonprofit leadership to really highlight the community need here and to bring in new funding. And it's been pretty successful. Pretty successful. We've had $7 million of external funding secured in the recent past, and we're pushing very hard for quite a bit more. So good stuff, and we're going to keep pushing for that. New administration will be interesting to see how that plays out, but we continue to do what we can to bring some dollars in the community so that we are not funding it through just local ratepayers and local tax dollars, since it is obviously quite expensive. Sustainability also has some flood prevention work that they're doing kind of concurrently with stormwater. So they have a series of small grants, community grants for both flood proofing. Well, yeah, right now it's just flood proofing. I shouldn't say just, it's pretty big, but for flood proofing, that website there's got a wealth of information, and Brady Henderson over at Sustainability is great to work with on some of these mitigation tools. So just getting that out there to the community that this is a resource we have. And with that, I know I ran through the slides really quickly, but I didn't want to be here for 2 hours. If you have any questions, happy to help. And if I don't have the answers, I'll get back to you with what I can find out.
Hey, at this Kurt, I have one quick question. When we did the bond, we were talking about the need for more operating revenue, operating funds because of the, and I never say it right, retention or detention. I can't remember what the new ponds, if you will, that we had to put in place because of the fire, and we did that with the federal funds. But there was a kind of a uptick we predicted of $1 million a year in terms of maintaining those, dig them out and everything. Is that how's that tracking? Are they being maintained? Are we kind of on budget, a little under, over? What do you think?
Sure. That's my answer. So no, that's a hard one because it's going to be tricky based on events. So we haven't seen a whole lot of sediment in, for example, Schultz basins. There's a little bit in that upper basin. Parkway Basin saw some pretty substantial damage this year, which is a little tricky because that has not yet been transferred over to the city. So that's still owned by the county flood control district. So that has not been repaired, and we'll have to figure out who's got that on their docket for work. So I guess my point there is, yes, there's maintenance that we know of. There's maintenance that's going to be ongoing, and it's going to be expensive. I mean, maintenance of detention basins is pretty steep. There are some flood control districts, not here, obviously, but in other parts of Arizona and the Southwest, where the majority of their operational budget by far is for clearing out sediment. So we're there. We're going to be there. And as we keep building holes in the ground, we're going to be spending even more money on operations. Right now, we have 1.8 million budgeted as a one-time expense, and that is mostly through the remainder of that State Bill 1720. So that State Bill 1720 was $9 million, roughly 8.99, from the state back when they had a budget to the city. So originally that was going to be 5.2 million to Highway 180. That was the engineer's opinion of probable cost, and the remainder was going to be in a fund that was going to eventually become a revolving fund for detention basin maintenance. Now the 180 project, the real costs did rise a fair bit from that EOPC. So we went from 5.2 to a little over 7 million, not including real estate property acquisitions, which I don't have a number on that right now. So that did kind of cut into that a little bit. We're at roughly 1.8 for that detention basin maintenance, but that is a one-time. So as that's drawn down, we will have to reprioritize our budget within the stormwater utility of how to replenish that fund. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, thank you very much. Any other questions?
Yeah, this is Don. excuse me, based on the work that the city's done, in response to the burns on the, southwest side of the, mountain, the work in Schultz Creek along the Rio de Flag, at various places through town and moving out to the east. Is there any impact in relationship to the old Corps of Engineers study on, or has that basically gone away?
So are you talking about the Rio de Flag, the 2000 study?
Yeah, Rio de Flag realignment or channelization.
Yeah, that's a great question, Don. So that was actually looked at, not intentionally, wasn't something we wanted to look at, but that was looked at earlier this year because the flood control district came out with what they call a pre-fire study. And what it was looking at different scenarios if other portions of the Rio de Flag were to burn. And one of their more catastrophic scenarios was if the entire upper Rio de Flag was to burn, and if the entire upper Rio de Flag was to have a 2-inch rain event on it, which, as you know, is pretty conservative. And with that, they were showing that there would be 2,300 CFS make it to downtown. So obviously quite a bit higher upstream in Baderville and in Cheshire, et cetera. But by the time it made it to downtown, it'd be 2,300. So that kind of forced our hand a little bit. We had to go back to that 2000 hydrology study, go back to the RDF hydraulic study, and see what they were designing for our larger RDF project. And what that's showing at Benito, so the upper location of where that tunnel goes, is 2,100, which is quite a bit higher than the FEMA flow, which has always been of some consternation to some folks. So really what we're showing is even in the most catastrophic scenario that the county is showing, the Rio project not only has benefit, but it can really take that year zero post-fire flood, which is, I think, a pretty interesting story.
Thank you. That kind of leads to my second question. And considering all the work that's been done within the watershed and just the driving around, looking around that I assume that you've been doing in the process of following up with all of that, have you noticed any specific areas that kind of catch your eye as future potential problem areas, problem sites for, for flooding, for flood management?
I can think about 100 right now, but
So can I.
but the two biggest ones that I'm in my head. I'm not saying that's what's in the 5-year capital plan. It's pretty close, but the two biggest ones would be Fanning Wash, which is impacted by that 1977 radio fire, and the other unnamed tributaries that come off the south side of Mount Eldon that we've seen pretty considerable floods in the last 20 years coming off of that. So we are working on design, at least for Fanning Wash, as well as some of those tributaries. So we have the Shadow Mountain detention basin that's at somewhere between 30 and 60% design. So that is above Appalachian Drive to detain or retain some of that sediment. And then we have 3 different designs going on for Fanning Wash itself, as well as a couple grant opportunities that we're chasing for that. And that's going to be pretty large project if that goes forward. And then the other one is kind of at the outfall, if you will, of our neighborhoods. So the Big Phil Lake, so the Rio de Flag at Country Club at the BNSF, working with them on that. So we actually have a design for that now. We're at 60% design. We've been working quite a bit with BNSF, and we're hoping to apply for a Protect grant, which is an infrastructure grant, this January. So we're working with ACOM, that's the grant writer that BNSF chose, and Trans Systems, which is the designer for BNSF, to work moving forward with that. Our local consultants on the project is WLB, SWI, and Jay Fuller, who have all helped at different times on design components of that structure under BNSF.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, this is John Nauman. And I have a question for you. But first, I want to really thank your department for all the work you've done. The work on 180 is amazing to get it done that fast. So I appreciate that, and I'm sure everybody else does too. Um, my question is relating to Don's question. What is the timetable for the Rio project to the downtown area right now?
Great question. They were going to break ground next year, but because of a couple things in contracting that they're still working through, the new timeline is, I believe, early 2026 for breaking ground on phase one.
So when do you think, I mean, and then the phase one is the part through south side? Okay. When is the phase that involves the ball fields and the area above the middle school pond going to start?
So that's phase two. Like they kept it simple. There's a phase one, phase two. There's not like phase 16, but might end up being that way. I'm going to defer to Christine Cameron as the project manager on that, the city project manager, to give you an answer. I'd be hesitant giving you an answer right away because phase one is going to be complicated enough that I think it's still a little hazy when that's going to wrap up, and you really need to complete phase one before you even start phase two. Because if you start phase two before you actually have an outfall that you can drop it into, it's just going to get a little messy. So I think the hope is that phase two starts about 3 years after phase one started, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that.
So just to refresh my memory, the phase two then will involve using the ball fields in that area as a large retention basin, if I remember right. Is that, no?
Yeah, that was one of the design alternatives, but that wasn't the one that was chosen by the Army Corps. So yeah, phase two, essentially the furthest upstream would be the Navajo flood wall and Beale Drive bridge. There'll be a new bridge at Beale Drive, a new flood wall along Navajo Drive, and then for substantial improvements, it really doesn't start until after Francis Short Pond, and then right up in Nidos where the new 11 by 16 tunnel starts.
I went to the, going back to the Schultz Creek 180 project, I went to the informational system or presentation that was done by the county and Forest Service at Secret School when they did a great job. A lot of information on covering some of the charts that Joe wasn't there. Unfortunately, he was sick, so he couldn't be there. But great information. I would just encourage you, the city, to really work with the county closely and encourage the Forest Service to close the forest down to motorized vehicles when the forest gets not into tinder dry, but starts to dry out. I know we had one little fire up there this summer, but it never got away from us. But so I would just encourage the city to encourage that on the part of the county and the Forest Service.
Yes, Rob Vane. I want to jump back to the wedge, cedar wedge, just briefly again. I never fully understood, is that a completely gravity-fed system, or is there some active pumping? Can you describe just a little more about the design of that?
Yeah, so it will be a gravity system. So it's a 60-inch pipe into the wedge, and then it'll have an actuated gate to close that off. So we don't want to just keep pushing water into the wedge to the point where it overflows and goes all over the place. So at a certain point, it will close off if there's so much water above the design capacity, so that we are pushing the flood down the original channel instead of through the offline system. So 60-inch with a gate to the wedge. The wedge has both retention and detention components. Retention being where you're holding the water there forever. Detention where you're passing it through. So retention meets our LID requirements or low impact development requirements here within the city. The detentions for the actual flood attenuation. That is dripped back into the system, I believe, and I'm going off memory here, so don't quote me on it. I believe it's a 24-inch pipe It's a relatively small drain pipe that continues down Cedar and then drains back into Spruce Wash. So the plan is to meet all detention criteria, which should be drained within 36 hours. Yeah, and all gravity fed. We don't do lift systems in stormwater, at least not yet, not here.
How deep is that detention basin? I'm just going by visually. It's obviously visually is not the way to do it, but um, looks like the wedge is almost uphill from the wash, and at least at the surface. And so I'm curious how deep that is.
Yeah, it's not too deep. It's actually, yeah, it's pretty much all downhill. So I mean, yeah, I think we only have to excavate in probably 7, 8 feet at the most, and it's all gonna be graded back out. So we're talking 7, 8 feet at the deepest. Most of it's only gonna be 3, 4 feet deep.
From a safety viewpoint, does that have to be protected by fences and so forth?
Yeah, there'll be, per all the code. Yeah, there'll be fences where we need to have fence. Mhm.
Got it. Thank you.
One last real quick question here. Um, In terms of the flow down the Rio below where Schultz Creek will come in now, what are the bottlenecks and what would the flow be because of those bottlenecks before it gets down to the middle school pond?
We don't actually foresee any bottlenecks, so we have to do a no adverse impact analysis. We don't have to. We do a no adverse impact analysis for any of these large projects. There was a minor bottleneck immediately downstream of the confluence, and we've taken care of that. So we actually dredged out, restored channel capacity for that area. Um, we're expecting up to 1,000 CFS in the worst case scenario coming out of Schultz. That channel can take about 1,800 at the smallest bottleneck in the northern part. Most of it's about 3,000 CFS that it can take. So yeah, plenty of space, plenty of capacity for what we might see out of Schultz.
Awesome. Thank you, Ed. Great
All right. Well, thank you
presentation.
for all the great questions. Those are amazing. And I'll kick it off, if you're okay with it, I'll kick it off to the next item.
Yep, we'll go to 5B, which is the reclaimed water rate discussion. An update from Aaron Young.
Good evening, Commissioners and Chairman Riegelman, Aaron Young, Water Resources Manager. The group has been working under the guidance of Chairman Riegelman with the work group. In the work group that's led by the chairman. Rob Vane and Don Bills are sitting in the work group. We have Aspen Valley, Snowball, Continental, our Parks and Rec Department, NAU, participating in the work group. We've had 2 meetings and, and council member suite. How could I forget? It's a very important piece to the puzzle. And Kurt just revised his first draft of a guidance document and passed that to just 2 of us to take a quick look at, and then we'll distribute. Kurt, I imagine you'll distribute that to others for comments. And Shannon Jones and Lee Williams are also participating for staff. So no real update other than you're revising the second draft. And what are the next steps, would you say, Kurt? I know you wanted to try to wrap this up in December.
Yeah, I think we'll get that draft out and get everybody's feedback and sit back or get back, huddle up and figure out what we want the guidance we want to give city council. I mean, I would say after the first 2 meetings, seems to be momentum to decouple reclaimed water rates from that 35%, that simple 35% of potable, just to kind of, I'll say it, to get underneath the hood and understand what's really in that number. No one's advocating raising rate, lowering rate. It's just we'll probably need to head down a cost of service study so that we can set that rate up to be freestanding on its own volition, if you will, and then start in the future having that as a basis of, okay, if this is the rate for reclaimed water, how does that look as a potential component of DPR, IPR? How does it look relative to potable? What are some of the stresses and strains on that in terms of supply and demand? So I think it's a healthier. I think we'll end up in a place where not only the customers but the community and the city council have a better vision of what's in reclaimed water based on that rate structure. So, but more to come. Everybody's been I'm really happy with the feedback and the push and pull in the meetings, and everybody's really had really good observations and questions, comments. So I think it's been really productive so far.
Yeah, I would agree. It's actually nice for the reclaim customers to talk amongst themselves about, the service that they're getting, any challenges they're having, and then just hearing, their different opinions on rates and what kind of quality of water they might want someday, if it does change. It's interesting. Um, and the timing for cost of service study, I believe staff were proposing that would come with the next water rate uh, cost of service analysis, which would begin in January 2026, I believe, is looking for Shannon Jones. Yeah, he's nodding his head. So that's the next time we would be revisiting the water rates. Another piece that I heard is for the reclaimed water users to look at the CIP and maybe talk about what additional projects, um, that group would want to see funded. We could talk through the projects in terms of those that bring additional capacity, those that bring additional, um, that are easier for just improving aging infrastructure, um, aid the operability of the system, and talk through that long list that was proposed back in October last year. So anything else from those who have sat on the work group? Thumbs up. Kurt, would this come to the commission in December as a formal recommendation from the commission? Was that your
I
closing
was
idea?
kind of hoping that might be where we get to. So let's see if we can sprint and get there. And one thing, one more concept that kind of came up was, as we do the cost of service study, is really looking at what is it we want Reclaim to do? Is it keep status quo? Is it make the system more robust and with more redundancy in it, or try to add some features? Because I think one of the discussions that the group is going to have in the near future is, do we add more customers or sell more, if you will, reclaim water and sort of build up the revenue stream, but knowing that there is a possibility in the future that reclaimed water becomes a source for IPR, DPR, and then you have to sort of throttle back um, what's available to the customers that you brought on. So there's going to be some perception management, some expectation management that's going to have to happen, I think, in the next 2 years, in 25, 26, to think through how do you want to position reclaimed relative to Red Cap Ranch, relative to other things, and not get people dependent on it and then have to back them off. So that'll be sort of a side note, I think, in the whole discussion. But so that's it. That's it for me. But yeah, I'd like to see us get to a point where we can at least point to where we think it should go in December. And then if you all need to refine that in the first quarter next year, that's fine too.
Okay. Not seeing any hands up for discussion. Oh, I see a red mic actually.
Since I'm kind of in the dark on this one, but these two guys are on the subcommittee, correct? Um, with regard to the comment of increasing the usage, it's really important to note the timing of that. Unless you have additional storage, you cannot increase the usage during the summer months. It's just, we're already using to max capacity, correct? During 3 months?
Correct.
So that would make no sense. So unless you come up with an idea for storage, you better take that one off the table, because that would preclude annual, 12-month DPR usage. So I don't think that makes any sense. So I'll just say that up front. The other thing would be, I would like to see a rough draft of this before you bring it to a Water Commission meeting to vote on it.
Yep, that's not a problem. And John, we've had that discussion about, is part of the process here trying to create either on customer premise or in the system more storage so that there is 365, if you will, availability of water for DPR, IPR. But that, and that's kind of one of the topics. Yeah. And obviously, you can't sell more if you can't deliver more, but between more conservation and increased storage capabilities, if we want them, is that a path to go or not? And that'll be one of the points that needs to get talked through, especially as you do a cost of service survey. It's how much more would it be? How much more do you need to raise rates to do those things? Don't know at this point. But
Would there be any plan in terms of using part of the rate increase or the additional money that we might gain from an increase in prices to encourage conservation and help entities conserve during the summer months? I'm guessing that's been discussed, but I don't know.
what do you think?
Yeah, I feel that was discussed, but not maybe how much water could, be conserved by the users. We really didn't dig into whether there was room to conserve. The reason really is why conserve? What's the driver? What would we do with the additional water if they started saving next summer? It would, at this point in time, just be discharged down the Rio to Flag. Yeah, it would be lost revenue to us, which we're not like, oh my gosh, lost revenue. It wouldn't be much, but until we have a place to put that water, IPR to the aquifer or DPR, what's true? Why are we driving conservation ahead of that decision? I think is kind of summarizing the conversation I feel was had. Oh, you're muted, Kurt, if you're talking to us.
Yeah, I am. Yeah.
Okay.
Although I do talk to myself a lot. John, look, the long term is, how do we be more efficient with this resource for a whole host of reasons? How do we reduce usage so that either A, we can provide water to others, or B, provide it to ourselves? And so you've got things happening like what we heard on from Pine Canyon. We heard that Aaron, what's the Coles group? It's Alpine Valley? No, what is it?
Aspen Valley Golf Course.
Aspen Valley. Sorry. Aspen Valley is going through something similar where they've got a plan to return some of the turf back to natural and redo some of the irrigation on 9 of the holes. So they'll have a reduction. So it's that balance in near term of you can conserve, but you end up losing revenue. And what do you do? Does it really help? Yes or no? But the long-term trend has to be acknowledged, and we've got to work on that. And so part of the discussion is, yes, there's going to be a fee. What we don't want city commission or the public to misconstrue is, while the rate is 35% potable, but realize those rates are going up. We're going to exit at the end of 5 years with about 500,000 more in revenue per annum than we started with. And when you look at the 5-year period, you've increased, if everything else stays the same in terms of usage, it was about $1 million of cash that has been generated to do and fix some of the CIP things that need to get fixed in terms of aged infrastructure. But can you also go through and pull some dollars out for conservation activities, matching funds, studies, that kind of thing? And Shannon, Director Jones, and will dig through all that, into the next 24 months to figure out where we can do those things. But I think those are the types of recommendations that we want to put and help educate the city council around. Is these are things that are good and earnest actions that we need to take a look at to get ourselves ready for some questions and decisions that need to happen in the next 5 years, right?
Yeah, and I wasn't talking about next year. I'm talking about 5, 10 years down the road, because any conservation measures are going to take years to do. So what happens in the next 2 or 3 years is immaterial. What happens in 5 to 10 years is important, because that's probably the time frame we'll need to have seriously thinking about new sources of water. So, I mean, there are lots of things. I mean, you can start replacing, grass with AstroTurf in the parks. We can talk to NAU about changing to decrease that summer usage. So.
Agree. Don, did you or Robbie, you guys want to I don't want to hog up the comments, so if you got anything you want to add.
Yes, this is Rob. I would just say it's a work in progress, and we've touched on many of the topics that require a lot of discussion, and we're underway.
Yeah, and this is going to be a
more
long
for
time.
me.
Thanks, Don. Sorry, I was just going to say this is not a one and done. I think what we're trying to do is set the stage for here's things we need, here's things the city, the council, the department, the commission need to start thinking about as we head down this journey, right? Because it's going to be a decade-long journey. All right. Thank you, Aaron.
Yep, thank you.
All right. Well, we have no old business. So 6 is over. 7, informational items. Anybody have any informational items from the chair, commission member, or staff?
Mr. Chair, I think there's no updates from staff, but definitely still available for any questions. Thank you.
Any of the commissioners? No? See some shrugs? All right. Well, then we can move to item 8, which is adjournment. So we will adjourn the meeting at 4:53 p.m. and thank everybody for your participation, and thank you again our commissioners Maine and Bills for the side work on the working group. That's been excellent. So thank you all.
Thank you, Kurt.
Yep. Have a great afternoon or evening.